Hello everyone, welcome once again to Identity Purpose. Welcome if you are new here, and welcome again if this is your second or third time coming to Identity Purpose podcast. This is the second episode in our Discover Yourself or Self-Discovery series, and I'm excited to be here again with my brother Sam. So Sam is very interested in psychology and he's always reading and studying psychology. He has done that for many years. Anyway, so today we'll be jumping into a few breakdown of what we talked about in the last episode. The last episode was more like an introduction where we spoke about identity purpose, and we broke it down into what is identity and what does that have to do with purpose. Now today we'll be specifically looking at identity a little more. Who am I is the question we're answering, and then later on we'll be looking into also origins, where we come from and how that inputs into who we are and our identity and everything. So welcome Sam to Identity Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm actually doing good.
Amazing. So let's jump straight into it. Who am I? The first question we're asking is, who actually is qualified to define or identify us, to define us?
Mm-hmm. So that's a very good place to begin, because most of the times when we talk about identity, it becomes really hard to pin down because we don't have an authoritative source or like an understanding of an authority that can actually define who we are. Mm-hmm. So with an understanding that we are actually created by God. Now think of it in terms of a manufacturer. When they create something, a new creation is created. Mm-hmm. They are the ones who come, they will have either a show, whatever the case, they will introduce what the product is, what it is, what it's supposed to do, how it's supposed to work. And so in that sense, the creator, the inventor is the one who has the authority to tell us what a thing is. Now, meanwhile, when people receive a thing, they can interact with it however they want. And sometimes they can even give it names that the original inventor or creator did not give it. But again, in the end, the authoritative definition of whatever the product has been created comes from the creator, the one who made it. Now, in the context of human beings, understanding that we've been created by God, God is the only one who can actually authoritatively be able to say who we are. Our definition, our identity stems from Him. In other words, there's a level of misconception that's going to always come anytime we let other people or even our very own self define ourselves. You understand?
I understand, but then have you heard the statement, you can become whatever you want to become? What's wrong with defining your own identity and saying this is who I am?
So again, it goes to the idea that as human beings, we don't have the knowledge, understanding to accurately define ourselves. So what happens?
Know ourselves well enough?
Yeah, because again, here's what happens. Like, you were born in this world. Now you have narratives and stories that you were given to by your parents, by your culture, or whatever environment that you grew in. Now your identity, even the people who say they define themselves, actually they're like bouncing off information that they've gotten from other people. Yeah. Sometimes it can be in a way of conforming with that, what everyone else is saying, or sometimes it can be in a rebellious way where they now want to uproot themselves from everything that everyone is saying. But in the end, there is actually no authoritative basis from which we can define ourselves, because either we are filled with misconceptions, ideas that have been collected throughout our life from different sources, culture, school, the things we've read, the things we've watched. Mm-hmm. So the only person who can accurately actually define us is God.
Fair enough.
And quickly talking to the idea of you can be whatever you want. Again, it's about context, and I like to talk about the idea of half truth, right? The idea is that it's true that you can become so many things, but it's not actually true that you can become anything you want. You cannot become a plant. You understand? So that may sound like I'm just playing semantics, but it's all about context. you can become certain things within the context or within the limitations that God has actually set up for you, if that makes sense. I can become a doctor. I can grow up to do so many things. There's so much potential, but my potential is not unlimited. Can I become the sky? Can I become God? Of course I can't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I'm actually curious. Many people may be asking too, okay, so you're saying God defines who we are. So I'm curious, what does God say we are? Like, is it different for each person, or is it more general?
So when I talk about God, and of course people come from all these different religions and all of that, but specifically now understanding God of the Bible, the creator of heaven and earth, is the one who created us. And right there in the beginning, he introduced himself as the creator. He says, "You just not here, you did not just appear. I am the one who created everything as you see it." And he goes into a part of defining who we are. And what he says we are is that we are his image. So we are beings that were created out of the dust of the earth. Now we've been empowered by the breath of life that comes from him, and these two components in his creativeness, combine them together, they make us who we are, which is a living soul, as he says it. So in an understanding, what God is really saying is we are extensions of him. And there's even another part in the Bible where he says, "Ye are gods," meaning we are actually gods in the sense that we are in the God class. We're created after God's own kind, after God's own image. So when I look at you, you're God's image, I'm God's image, everyone is God's image.
Really?
Exactly.
That feels nice. That feels good. I'm not sure for the audience if you guys believe what he's saying. Maybe you can comment, share your thoughts in the comments. Now, that's actually interesting. So when a person, because it actually elevates the status of who we are, it seems.
Exactly. And I know that most people, especially from a religious point of view, believe or think that God needs to be where he is. Basically, he has to be way so powerful than us. Therefore, we cannot even make a statement to say that we are like God in terms of being gods, the way he says it. But the way you need to understand is, just going a little bit back, why would God create us? God created us not necessarily out of need. Because what do we do for God? Are we building cities for God? God created us for the sole purpose that he was filled with love, and out of this overwhelming, overflowing love, he created us so that he can have beings to share love. Now, the question is, how would we be able to love God and for him to love us if we were not in the same class, if we could not have enough similarities for our love to make sense to him and his love to make sense to us? Even though you may love a chicken, I don't think the chicken will necessarily feel your love in the sense of it will be able to make sense of your love and build a relationship with you.
Yeah, it cannot reciprocate. But then many people have pets that may be watching, and they might say that they actually have a good relationship with their pets and they reciprocate the love.
So again, you have to understand that many pets have some level of intelligence, right, that allows them to interact with us at a certain level. Dogs can remember you, they get excited when they see you, but now you cannot actually have a conversation with a dog. You cannot actually sit and tell, "This is how my day went," and you cannot have a certain level of intimacy with a dog. So all I'm trying to say is, for us to have intimacy with God, which is the sole purpose that we were actually created, we'll get into that later, we need to be able to process what God is and what he can be able to do for us. We need to be able to have a conversation. So we had to be created in his image. We had to be in his class. Otherwise, if we are not in God's class, it's a downgrading experience for him to come where we are to commune with us. You understand? Where it may work for us, it may work for us because obviously it's an upgrade, but that would be him constantly having to downgrade himself for him to be with us, which doesn't make any sense.
Interesting. But then one would say, isn't subscribing to that type of identity egocentric? And what does ego have to do with identity?
So we're actually gonna get into the whole ego. So I just want to say this. The way people think about things, and this is the whole idea of like half truths, right? Is I ask people, I say, I am like my father. I will grow up to be like my father. I'll grow up to have kids like my father. I'll grow up to have my own family like my father. Does that make me my father? Absolutely not. I will always grow as a child, a son of my father. There's no point at which I will be my own father. So when I have my own family, I'm not going to say, oh, wait a moment, Dad. Now that I'm a father, I don't need you anymore. I'm my own father. I can do all the father things that you used to do for me. In fact, my father, the more I grow, the more he also grows. To an extent, he will always see me as a son.
So you can never catch up to him.
Exactly. Now, it's even more simpler with God, because God is infinitely wise and loving. No matter how much we grow to become like him, we will never come close to being him. So saying that I'm in the God class, when I say that I am a God, I'm not saying that I'm my own God. I am a God because I was created by a God in his image. If God is a God, then I am a God.
So then one asks, you're a God to who? God is a God to us.
But you see the problem, right? You think of God as a position.
Okay, what do you mean
but
by God?
Being God is a nature, because again, remember that he says he created us in his image, which means he created us in his nature. We think, talk, walk like him. We process things. We have emotions just like God has emotions.
What's interesting is when we say the word God, we are actually most of the times referring to the position, not the person or the nature of the person.
Again, it's a question of understanding, because when you think about us, we're created in the image of who? The image of God. You understand? So then we are looking at the word God as an idea of who we are, from the understanding that we are literally an extension of God, that we are supposed to live reflecting who God is.
I have a philosophical question for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so you see a mirror. When we look into the mirror, it reflects us, right?
Yeah.
Can we then say, it's gonna be tricky, Sam is looking into the mirror.
Yeah.
And the mirror is showing Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Can we then say that the mirror is Sam in terms of its identity?
So you see the problem with that. The problem with that is that even though the mirror reflects you, it's only reflecting an image,
which we are made in the image of God.
So I will come to that in a moment. So the mirror cannot reflect your actions. In other words, think about if you were making money and the mirror was there, it doesn't help you end up with double the money because you made it twice. There's a reflection of you doing it. It's just a reflection in the sense of vision. You can see it, but you cannot interact with it in any other way beyond vision. You understand? So what image mean is in the true essence of. So most of the times, obviously, we think about image in as something that we see, but when God talks about image, he's more emphasizing the character, the nature. You understand? So we were created to act, to live like God, more than look like God, because God is a spirit. You think God looks like you?
Maybe.
Because God does not have a physical body. And this is why Jesus came down. Now Jesus looks like us because now Jesus has a body. However, God is a spirit. So how does a spirit look like?
That's a good question.
We need to understand the word image in the context of action, in the context of nature, essence, not in the way of image in as how something looks. You understand? Because we are created as physical beings, whereas God is a spirit. So God being a spirit, we may not necessarily look like him in terms of like physically. However, we are able to think like God can think. We're able to love like God can love. We have emotions like God has emotions. We are able to reason like God can reason. We are able to interact like God can interact. You understand? All these are things that we get from God. And this is what it means to be created in the image of God. So being the image of God means I'm an offspring of God. In other words, if somebody had experienced God before, if they saw me, they would be like, whoa, you are like God. You can talk like God. You can think like God. You can process emotions like God. You can create like God. You understand? You're almost like a mini version of God, just like you are a mini version of your dad. There's so many things that you take from your dad. Of course, in human beings, obviously, the image is there, but for God, it's not just about the image. So that's what it means to be the image of God. That's what it means to be created in the image of God. It means we are gods. We are in the God class. This is who we are.
The God kind. Interesting.
Yeah.
So when people think of identity, there's a few things we think of. So I guess we're going to run through them and figure out what's their right place. So let's begin with name. So my name is James Nyomugabo. That's my identity.
It's not. So name is a noun that we use to refer to you. Now again, you can still be you without your name. In fact, you'll see that so many people have gone to the extent of changing their names. Now, what that would mean... So if I change
my name, it won't change my identity?
100%, because even you, right? Sometimes people can call you different names. And you remember how people grow up, they are Christian, different names. A name is just a reference. There are so many different people. When we want to call for your attention, we have to have this word that when we say it, it's you. So a name is not who you are. It's just referring to who you are. In which case, what you are is the image of God. So you are the image of God called James.
Okay. But the name is not me.
The name is not you. It's obviously an important part of you because it helps us interact with you easily. I can call your name in a group of people. I can be like James, and it's a way I can call your attention. I can record our conversation and say I was speaking with James, and everybody knows who we were referring to. Even within English, we have things like pronouns, where I say, if I have already said your name, now I'll be like, oh, I was talking with him. Every time I say him, people know I'm referring to James. So it's more for reference, more than identifying.
Maybe here's a question then. Is identity fixed or is it malleable? Because the next question was, does the sort of name you have affect your identity? Because I'm thinking, for example, the typical story of Jacob and how God changes his name, and that really is pretty much changes who he is.
So when you look in the biblical terms, most of the names that we even give God are attributes that he has as a person. So you can read all these names, they mean something. We can say Almighty. We can say Almighty. It's now a name, but Almighty also means someone who has all the power, right? Now, for Adam, his name actually meant what he was in terms of what he was created to be. Father of all nations, where all humankind.
That's what Adam means.
Where humankind comes from, and that's what Eve also is, like mother of all nations, because we all descend from Eve. But now today the problem is most of the names that we have are, some of them are meaningless. Even when they have a meaning, the meaning has nothing to do with what we are at essence. But here's an idea. If, for example, we called you something that you could understand and you could relate with, you may want it to be how you act. It's going to influence so much of your actions or what you think your purpose is, but a name has no bearing on identity.
Interesting.
Because
like,
Adam...
you mean no effect whatsoever?
No, it has effect, but when I say has no bearing, it's your name does not determine your identity, but your identity should determine your name, if you like.
But your name can affect your identity. For example, if I call you...
So I want to clarify that, because you need to separate identity and purpose. So most of the people in the Bible were given names that would indicate their purpose. But there's a difference between your identity and your purpose. Because
your purpose is not your identity?
Exactly. You are the image of God, whether you are doing the purpose or not.
What happens when you tie your identity to your purpose?
This is something that can cause certain problems. So let me give you an example. Let's say Noah, right? Noah, his purpose was to build the ark. Now, what if we call him Noah the ark builder? And now he thinks his whole being is about building arks. Now, the season, the time, the phase for the ark and what it was supposed to save is over. Now, God is bringing him into a new space where the flood is over. He will feel totally useless in that world because his whole purpose and identity is built on building an ark. So your purpose, grows. And this is because as human beings, the way we understand purpose, it's limited per time, right? So again, you can see part of your purpose and attach yourself to that purpose. Even when God wants to propel you into a bigger thing, you will have a struggle because you have attached yourself to this purpose. But when you understand that you are the image of God, you were created to act and do like God, God can reveal certain parts of what you're supposed to do. You do what you have to do, but it's not something that you're supposed to get attached to. Rather, it's something that you do and you complete and you move on. Even when Jesus finished his mission, he says, Father, that which you gave me to do, I have finished. All those that you gave me, I have not lost none. So it's okay, I'm done with this task. Now he moves on, he goes to heaven. What he was doing on earth is not exactly what he's doing now, but it's obviously connected. But he continues to be what he was.
Interesting. So it's okay to be attached to our identity, but not our purpose, so to speak.
I will always be the image of God, whether I'm going to have a relationship with God or not. This is why Psalm 82 makes a lot of sense, because Psalm 82 says, ye are gods, but you are going to die like the children of men. Why? Because you don't have an understanding. So what happens is, you are created in my image, but you are going to die just as mere beings. Because again, we'll talk about this in a moment, that as human beings, we have a certain part of our identity that is fixed. There's nothing that can change. And then there's a part of our identity that we should walk into willingly, cautiously. So how does this work? So think about you as a child, right? You were born looking like your father, right? However, and you have certain qualities, like biologically speaking, physiologically, you may have facial features that look like him. You may talk like him, his voice, whatever height and whatnot. However, when you get older, you may look at how your father acts and what he does, and you may want to become more like him. So if your father was like, for example, a hunter, you may want to be a hunter like your dad. If your father was a businessman, you may want to do that. But also you may decide that you don't want to do that. Now, in the world, you have so many examples of people who grew up to become like their mothers, like their fathers. At the same time, you have people who've grown up to hate and disconnect themselves with everything that has to do with their parents, because what, they don't want to be like them. Now, it means that even though these people have disconnected themselves to their parents, they'll always be like their parents to an extent. But then the people who consciously decide to to be like their parents, they are now going to be more like their parents, more than the ones who decide not to. Now, with our God-given identity, we are born the images of God because God created us in his image. However, there's a part of God that we can get to reflect more the more we work with him and accept him and actually give him the power to reflect himself through us. Which means that when, for example, God is talking and calling certain people his friends, or even becoming children of the Most High, or becoming sons of God, is not just something that everybody is. Because the Bible, for example, says that when Jesus came, those who received him, he gave power to become the sons of the Most High God.
Okay, so what's the difference between a son of God and the image of God? Is it the same thing?
I will explain this in this way. First of all, as human beings, we are tri-human, if that makes sense. So number one, we have a physical body. Number two, we have a spiritual part of us. And number three, we have a part of us that connects the physical and the spiritual. Now, everybody is born within the physical world, right? And the brain part, which connects the spiritual and the physical, is always working. And the reason why is because it's important for our survival. So when you think about the body and the brain together, they have all these mechanisms that helps you stay alive, like all these reflex actions and all of these things. What happens is, on a basic level, on a physical and solical level, we are still reflecting God, because we can think, we can act, we can talk, we can do all of these things. However, when we enter into a relationship with God, it amplifies our spiritual aspect in terms of reflecting his nature and character in us. You understand? Now we can be able to show the fruit of the Spirit. For example, we can be able to show the God kind of love. We can be able to show the God kind of humbleness. We can be able to experience the God kind of compassion. You understand? Now, these things are things that are not necessarily possible for just a mere human being who does not have a relationship with God. So it's about those levels to understand that on a basic level, everyone is the image of God, but some people will reflect him more than others because some people have a connection or an intimate relationship with him more than others. And you see, even within the Bible, God called some people his friends. Not everybody was his friend.
True. Others are enemies. God has enemies, right?
Oh, but yeah, there are also some people who he has actually called enemies. But those people were still created in his image, unfortunately. So it's, if you have a son, and even if your son is rebellious, he's still your son. Looks like you, has your DNA.
But then the image can be tainted and perverted.
So you see, the problem is, even when the image is tainted and
think of DNA mutations.
So even when it's still built on that nature that God has given you. So in other words,
perverted.
Yeah, it is, but it will never be something completely new to the extent it still reflects no God in it, if that makes sense.
Okay, but that is problematic now because, well, I was gonna say, what's his name? Lucifer, but he wasn't really created in the image of God. But let's pick humans, right? Yes, we reflect the image of God, but sometimes we can distort it such that we actually reflect the opposite of who God is.
When you say that kind of statement, there's a point of view from which you're looking at it. Now, from a point of view of morality, God is holy, and God has like this picture of who he is that he has shown us. Now, what I want to tell you is that there are people who absolutely are like night as compared to God being the light in terms of morality. But even in their darkness, they are still exhibiting or showing God's nature. Why? Because let's say the Bible says that the people, right, in Genesis, they were thinking, their thoughts were evil continually.
Yeah.
Those thoughts, the evilness is opposite to God, but the ability to think, they got it from God. You understand?
Well, I mean, that's like,
and this is why I'm telling you that everyone in the world, even Adolf Hitler, you can say he was the image of God. He could think, he could plan, there's all these functionalities that he has that stems from God. He was not like a tree. You understand?
So let's go back to Genesis. It says, let's make them image, and then it qualifies that by saying, according to our likeness, right? So image, I guess I understand image sounds like picture, design, and I see what you're saying, but I think the second part is also important, likeness, meaning the moral aspects, not just the physical features or
but when it says likeness, it doesn't necessarily specify to say moral likeness. That's part of it, but it's not the only thing.
But I'm assuming if I say likeness, it means I'm similar to you in all aspects, right? Including.
Yeah, so God's will is that we will be like him in all parts. But like I gave you the example of your father, like you can be like your father, but even kill your father and even kill everyone. Like, do you understand it? This is the complexity of the world we live in, that God has created us in his image, but he has given us freedom where we will try to go as far as possible from his image. But of course, in the end, even when the people who are going to eventually go to hell, for example, they will go. But God said, you are gods, but you are dying like the children of... You understand? It's like you were created to be gods. There's a still part of me that I see in you, but there's so much darkness in you, I have to let you go.
Okay, fair enough. I think I get your point.
And this is very important for us because sometimes we get to a place where we think we're reflecting so much of God that we are so much better than other people because now they've lost godness in them because they absolutely not like God in any shape, form or way. But those people are still the image of God. Those people still have, basically, if God's image was a company, they are still stakeholders.
Interesting.
They're still stakeholders, and this is why God shows mercy. Because there's a part of every human being, no matter how dark, no matter what they've gone through, that God can relate to. The moral part may be so broken, and like the way Bible says, though your sins be red, right, like crimson, it says, right?
Yeah.
It's thinking from a moral point of view, but God can still see his image in you. He can still see you as a human being who was created in his image, who were created to function like him. And of course, this appeals to God's nature. It's like a father-son. No matter how much your son will do, fathers would understand, no matter how far a son goes, when that son comes, there's a part of him that you just see yourself, and it compels you to have compassion. So I'm just saying, we are all the image of God, but God obviously wants us to completely reflect him. He wants us to have intimacy with him. Even when we are the prodigal son, we are still the image of God, except at that point it just hurts for God.
Wow. I'm trying to find a phrase from that poem by Jefferson Bethke, the greatest artist of all time. And there's a part he says, even a temple in ruins points to an architect. Even when the temple is in ruins, something
exactly. But basically, it will not just appear like sand where there was no building. Like you can say, like, this thing is ruined, but there was once a building here.
Okay, how about gender?
So I'm just going to put a couple of things there in a box called How I Am. So what are you? I am the image of God. I'm a human being created out of the dust with the breath of life from God. Now I am living, so I am the image of God. Now question is, how are you? How you are is how you were created. You can say, I am a male, I'm a guy, right? I was created physically different from female, and this is what gender is. So gender is the idealistic version of sex, because what happens is we say, oh, you are male, obviously you are physically different from female. So gender is all the ideas that we form about how you're supposed to live, how you're supposed to handle yourself, what you're supposed to do based off your sex. So we can say, in our culture, males behave in such a way. Because you are female, you cannot do this, you can dress like this, you can go there, you can't go there. You understand? This is what gender is. So
you're saying that gender is human-made construct?
So again, gender mostly is human. It's built up just from observation. So we can say, oh, because this person is a woman, I don't think it's appropriate for them to do X, Y, Z. But again, there are things that God has declared or said about the different sexes in what they should do, what they should be able to do, and what they cannot do. It becomes like principles, because he's the one who created us. He knows what he created the female body to do and the purpose behind, as versus the male body. So when God says it, he's saying it from a point of love and a point of understanding. But when humans do it, we are just making observations, and sometimes the things we say are just out of ignorance. So we say, because you are male, you cannot do this, or because you are female, you cannot do this. So most of ideas about gender are actually built on misconception and misunderstandings. Some of them are not harmful in any way. For example, to say, because you are female, you should dress like this. It does not harm you in any way, morally, like physically. No, I'm just saying different cultures.
Oh.
In different cultures, people dress differently based on genders.
Okay. So then how about sex?
And
what's
again,
the difference between gender and sex?
Like I said, sex is physical, where gender is just an idea. It's mostly part of culture, or just the society narrative of how a person who has a specific sex should behave. You get?
Okay.
Where sex is physical, gender is not necessarily. It's just an idea of how you should behave. So both of these things are not who you are. You are not your sex. You are not just male. Male is how you are. Who are you? I'm the image of God who was created with a female body or a male body, you understand?
So Sam, how many genders are there?
Again, when you say genders, within the Bible, there's only two things that God mentions, and it's not necessarily gender. It's more speaking to sex more than gender. So God says, created he them male and female. So God created human beings in two versions. There's a male version and there's a female version. That's what God created. And that's
Okay.
what was from the beginning, right? So the idea is sex is how you are. It's not who you are. In other words, your identity cannot be built on the fact that you are male or female. You are the image of God who is male.
What is your thought around gender identity, which is each person's internal and individual experience of gender, where now we have what they call gender fluidity, so a person can feel male, female, or the whole LGBTQX plus whole continuum?
Again, like we covered at the beginning, who has the authority to define us? It's God. Who am I to tell you what you are?
And who are you to tell yourself who you are?
Exactly. This is the problem that we have. And a lot of identity crisis that we have today is because we have designated ourselves. We have chosen ourselves to be the ones who define ourselves. And we have also elected other people to be the ones who define us, to be the ones who can tell us who we are. And again, in both cases, there's a lot of unknowns because, again, you are just here. Do you know how you came into the world? Do you know how you came into being? You cannot and you shouldn't consult your personal experiences with either certain parts of you or certain things, encounters that you've gone through to be the things that you build an understanding of who you are upon. It's highly degrading because here's the thing, right? We have been created in God's class. God's class is a nobler class. It's a higher level of living. It's a higher level of operating. But now let me give a different example, right? I take a body part of me and then this is who I define myself based on. This is what I am. This is what my identity is built on. It's definitely an important part of me. The fact that I'm male has affected my life in many different ways and it will continue. And of course, we are going to talk even more about it when we look at purpose, because if you are female, for example, you have a womb, you have an ability to co-create with God. You have an ability to participate in this divine creative process that God now has chosen to work with you. It can affect your understanding of what God's purpose is for you, right? Mm-hmm. But then you are not just that. In other words, there's a time you will cease to be a mother and you still be the image of God. There's a time where you were not even a mother when you were still a girl. You were still the image of God. So I'm trying to say,
in the event that you're not able to have a child.
Exactly. So it doesn't mean now you've lost your identity because you cannot give birth. You understand? And this is the problem when we build our identity on certain parts of us that are either change over time or they depend on certain factors, because what happens when those things don't happen?
How about things like race? Race doesn't change. I'm black.
So again,
as you can see,
this is another, I was gonna come to that because it's all part of how we are. How am I? Look at me. How do I look? This is my complexion. This is the texture of my hair. This is my height. This is my body shape. All of those things, right? It's just how you are. It's not who you are. Because again, what you'll notice, of course, race can be more consistent over time than maybe your hair or your body shape, because your body shape can change. And of course, for some it does, for some it doesn't even change. But this is not important enough for your identity to be built on it. And the idea of race, here's how it comes. Now, I will take some time to talk about ego. Now, in absence of our knowledge of who we are, our brain has this sort of need to identify, because we all look at ourselves and say, wait a moment, what am I? Who am I? And guess what we do? We define ourselves based off everything around us. We try to identify ourselves by saying, oh, wait, that is another person who looks like me, but wait a moment, they're a little bit shorter than me. So we define ourselves by comparing ourselves with others.
So collective identity.
So what we do is we find identity by looking for things that look like us, group ourselves in that one box, and differentiate ourselves from the things that don't look like us. And this is why race has become a very important thing, because we say, oh, you black, I look black, we are black. So we say we have black as, and we think this is an identity of who we are. And then we actually look at other people and we say, oh, those people have different skin than us, or they have this different kind of hair. And then we put them in a different box. But now you have problem with that, because you find out that when you go just an inch inside. We have more similarities if you think about the whole body as a mass. If you were going to just weigh it out in terms of weight, there's a much weight of similarity than that of differences, if that makes sense.
So the only difference between a black person, let's say, and white person is just pigmentation.
So much pigmentation than anything else. Of course, it's going to be the hair, the texture of the hair. But if you go inside, most of our organs and everything inside, the blood, and it's all the same.
Are the organs, do they have a different color for black and white?
Of course, I am not a doctor. My biology knowledge is not like way up there, but I have not heard of such a thing. Unless there is like some sort of complications or disease. But like we look more similar inside. So you understand that what we are supposed to celebrate as this uniqueness that God has given us, we use to build identity on, which was not supposed to be the case. You are not black.
What am I?
You are the image of God.
That is black.
That looks black.
That's better. So
Because and when you think about it, when God is interacting with us, look throughout the Bible, when God is interacting with us, it almost seems so unimportant to him to appeal to our specific colors. And the times that colors are mentioned is when people are talking about.
I think it does.
No, so wait. The times that color is being spoken about is for descriptive or literature uses. For example, it say, can the Ethiopian change his skin? But God is having a different conversation and he's just using that as an example. But he does not walk to people saying, oh, hey, Jeremiah, you black person from whatever, or you Asian, but you understand. So it's very important to understand that the way our identity economy is running now is built on things that were not supposed to be the cornerstones of our identity. Our identity stems from God. But what do you do when you've run so far away from home? You have to find yourself a new identity, and this is what ego is built on. So ego says, I am black, you are white. I'm tall because you are short. I am bigger because you are smaller. I am more wealthier because you are poor. So your ego survives on all these little differences that you see, and sometimes even survives on you feeling that you are better than others, because this is how you get a sense of importance.
So are you saying that in the absence of our true identity, which is found in God, whatever other identity we pursue is egocentric and ego-based?
Yeah, ego is what runs your life. So even now, you may find out that you have ideas in your brain where you think to yourself, basically, you as human beings, we have a need to feel important and feel unique.
A need?
Yeah, it's like a need. You want to know that you are important. Now, what happens is, if we don't understand where our sense of importance and uniqueness comes from, we try to grab it anywhere else, which is obviously building on these things. So you'll see a lot of people within their cultures, within their races, they say, oh, black people are better, or they say, oh, me in our tribe.
We are the original.
Yeah, we are the original such thing. Then where do you put everybody else? Your tribe and your culture is so important than any other culture in the world. You guys built the whole world, and you are using the own. Look, even when you look within those cultures, they are enjoying most of the times things that were built by other different cultures, inventions that came from people from different races. So when what God intended was a one world, one community that lives in harmony and accepts, celebrates differences, not using it to ostracize each other or to build all these different little boxes.
Interesting. I guess that goes with ethnicity as well and social class. Ability and disability?
Yeah, just touching a little bit on culture, like culture and ethnicity, tribe. Again, these are the things these are spaces through which you've been created. Of course, I am the image of God that was created through specific parents and was created through a specific culture, in a specific tribe, ethnic group, in a given country, in a given space, you understand? But those things are not who I am. That's just where I came through. That's just where I was given to the world through, you understand? I'm the image of God in the absence of those things. I'm still the image of God even when those things are not being considered. They have a role they play, and it's important to acknowledge and understand where they fit, but these are not the things that I should define myself based on.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about ability and disability, It's also another thing we can say, I'm disabled, I'm this. But when you think about it, we have all been created by God because he has a specific purpose for us. And God's purpose is what determined the design for which he designed us, like the kind of design that he designed us to be like, if that makes sense. When you come into the world, it's more relevant to know the purpose for which you were created and understand that the ability that you have actually been matched to your purpose.
Okay.
Now, your ability do not define you. Your ability is just what you can do and what you cannot do that helps you fulfill the purpose that you were created for. You are still the image of God even when you don't have legs. And in fact, we have actually seen people who've gone on to live happier lives and be more impactful without legs, without hands. And we've seen people who have most body parts identify mostly with the things that they cannot do, the things that they think they cannot be able to do, and that has crippled their impact because they are not able to wake up and be able to do what they're supposed to do because they are constantly thinking about the things they think they cannot do. So ability is not identity.
Ability is not identity.
Ability or disability. So you can it's more descriptive more than identifying. You can be like, I'm a guy who can talk, right? The fact that I talk, it doesn't mean I'm a talking machine. Like, it's not my identity. Rather, I'm the image of God who either has both legs or don't have both legs or whatever the case.
Interesting. Okay, I don't want to go too deep on this, but let's move on to the next ones. I guess it's the same thing for profession. Like whether you have a degree or not, whether you have a job or not, or a doctor or a carpenter, all these things do not define your identity.
It's just what you can do and what you are doing. And matter of fact, we know some people's profession change. Today you can be working as a nurse, tomorrow you work as a doctor. Of course, it is important to acknowledge, and it's more what you do to either earn money for most people. Sometimes it's what you do to help or be impactful in the community, whatever the area you are in. But it's not who you are. It's not who you are. Jesus Christ is Jesus, God the Son. Even though he came in the world and he spent most times healing, we can put healing on his resume or his portfolio because he did healing. But now we do not primarily define Jesus as a healer.
What do we primarily define him as? The Son of God.
We understand him to be the Son of God because he came from heaven, and we all by extension came from God, but he came from heaven, and when he came with the ability to do different things that aligns with his heavenly purpose or heavenly mission. So he was healing, he was preaching, he was doing miracles, you understand, and he was connecting with different people. He was a carpenter at some point. So these are things that he was able to do. And the problem with defining ourselves with what we are able to do, sometimes it's again the idea of creating a box. So if I say I'm a singer, everybody's going to be like, Sam the singer. The moment I try speaking, they'll be like, hey, why are you speaking? You're supposed to be a singer. So as human beings created in the image of God, we don't have boxes. We live in a world of endless possibilities within the limits of what God has set for us. Mm-hmm. Which means you can sing today, you can be a carpenter, then tomorrow you can be a healer, then you can be a nurse, you can be a doctor and go into business and then manage orphanages. You understand? Mm-hmm. These things don't define you. It's just what you are doing, either to earn money, to be impactful, to help the community, or to meet different needs. But it's definitely not what your identity should be built on.
Okay, fair enough. And what do you mean by sexual orientation?
We were talking about sex, right? And sometimes people have an identity or a way of seeing themselves that is heavily dependent on the way they feel about themselves sexually. Sexuality is just a small part of us. It's just a small part of us. So if
what other parts are there?
What
other parts are there?
Oh, as human beings, we know we can think. For example, we have a brain. We have a physical body that can feel different things and is used for different things. We have all these internal organs that are doing different things. All these are parts of us that are there for different purposes, right? And so sex as the physical part, it's there for different reasons, and all the things that fit into the box of sexuality are also there for a purpose. And again, going back to us being the image of God, these are abilities and parts of us that were given to us so that we can live and be, express, manifest who God is, because again, we are here to reflect God. They're not there so that we can build a whole identity on them. So if I ask you, you cannot tell me I am a brain, because I have a brain and I think and I use the brain to think. Even though you use your brain to do most of the things, can you say you are a brain?
But can I say I am intelligent?
Yeah, you are intelligent. That's more descriptive than...
But is that my identity?
It's not. It's just descriptive. That's like saying I am hungry. It's like describing where you are. But of course, with intelligence, it's more like something that it's an ability that you have to be able to process and interact with the world and think and reason. But that's not the end of it. So all of these things we mentioned, they are just different parts and dimensions of you that are more relevant in certain parts of your life than others. Some are more important than others. But this is not who you are.
Yeah. I guess we can't go through all of them. But the other interesting one is religion. I'm Christian. You are Muslim or Buddhist.
Again, religion, when you look at how it is set up, is supposed to be an interface through which you should connect with your creator, really, than anything else. You are not your religion. So you can say I'm Christian. That's more descriptive than an identity. You are still the image of God. This is why when Jesus said, all those who received him, he gave the power to become the sons of God, not necessarily Christians.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so you can go around telling people I'm Christian. That's just more descriptive. You're saying, oh, I am part of this religion, whatever. However, when you meet God, God does not interact with you as necessarily a Christian. He says, my son, my child, because you are God's child. And this is what the Bible is saying, ye are the children of the Most High. This is how you should think about it. We'll forever be the children of God even when religion is gone, when there are not churches. There's no Christian hymns to sing necessarily in the sense of there are churches and all these organized religions and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So our identity in God is that which will always be, that no one can take away, not time or season can take away.
So not even values and beliefs? We can't have our identity around that?
Again, here's the problem with that. So like right now, I understand God, but I don't understand him perfectly. Now, I may build up certain values, or I may even transplant some values that I think I'm getting from the Bible, but some of them may be actually broken. Now, let's say I put my identity built on these values that I have created. Mm-hmm. The way it's going to be is that now, if those things are challenged, it's going to be as if my identity is being challenged. And I'm going to be very hostile around it, and it's going to be very hard for me to even see the error within my values. And this is what happens with religious extremism. It's because people have taken religion and fused it with identity. So if you said something against my religion, you are not attacking an idea and a way of doing things. No.
You're attacking me.
You're attacking me. Now it becomes very personal, and the way I'm going to react is going to be very aggressive. So I say, I am the image of God. I am still in the journey learning about God. I may have these values. I may understand these things. My ideas of what my values are may be able to change, but the fact that I'm the image of God will not change. If somebody comes and tells me, has an attack on my particular religion, it's not a very personal thing. They're just talking of how things are done. They may be talking about the structure, but nobody can actually attack me being the image of God, because it's not something I do. It's not something I have to think necessarily. It's how I was created through my mother and my parents by God. He's the one who made me the way I am. So the fact that I am a God is not something that I have to do every time I work like the image of God. Why? Because God created me this way. And this is what he says I am. It's not even something that I have to convince myself now, but it's what he says we are.
He knows who we are, right? So we can't argue with him.
Exactly.
Okay, maybe last one, personality.
So again, personality is more of how you are, because it's how you do things. So personality is mostly like your general temperament, your general attitude towards the world, and how you do things, how you think, right? For example, you have people who are extroverted and people who are introverted. Let's use that as an example. You can still be loving as extroverted or introverted, but the way you love is different. So a social butterfly person, when they love you, they will show emotions, they will hug you, they will talk and all of these things. An introverted person may love you but not be able to be super expressive or animated in such a way. They may be able to write you a simple note, but they are all in essence showing you the character of God, which is love. In other words, when you think about the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, being gentle, humble, and kind, and all of those things, everyone can be able to express them irrespective of their personality. They'll just be expressed differently. One, you may love me by writing me a note. Another person will love me by giving me a hug. Another person will love me by giving me a gift. Another person will love me by throwing a party for me. Like, you understand? All of these things are in principle love, but it just looks different depending on their different personalities and way of processing life. So personality will be a huge pointer in the purpose that God has created you for, because personality is how you see the world. So there are certain parts that you are more basically positioned to be able to interact and deal with more than others, but personality is not who you are. Your personality needs to be adjusted to God's character all the time. So I'm not my personality, and I have done a lot of personality tests, and I've gone into a lot of understanding with personalities. And when I see people, I can easily think, oh, what personality is there? Is he, is she, whatever. But personality can change in terms of you can adjust it to different times, different needs, and all this. It's just how you do things. It's in a way like your personal culture, but the difference is that personality has a part of it which is inherited, which is built in your DNA, the color of your hair, but it also has a part of it that is learned from interacting with the world, your parents, your family, your culture, the society, and different information you take over the course of your life.
Interesting. Is there another one that you wanted to touch on that is important to you?
I just wanted to talk just quickly about citizenship, nationality, even place of birth. Again, this is just citizenship is just like a status that you have. I can say I'm Canadian. It doesn't really change anything in me. It just gives me access to a certain country and certain privileges. That's all it does for me. But I was not born Canadian. And the thing is, you can gain citizenship and you can also lose it. That cannot be your identity.
So identity is something you cannot lose? So what you're trying to say?
Exactly. Now, here's an idea. I've actually, going back to culture, now I can say I'm Burundian, right? This is my identity. This is who I am. Now, I may reach a point where the Burundians say, we don't actually want you. You are not part of us. We don't accept you as part of us. They're going to ostracize me for one reason or the other. And we have seen this happen with so many cultures where people are part of given cultures, but because they would not be able to do certain things, those cultures ostracize them. They cut them off. Now, what happens when your understanding about who you are was just built on that? What do you become now? Because the people who you say you are part of, they're denying you. They say, we don't want you. Because most of us have this sense of identity, because whenever we say we are Burundian, we have some level of belonging and acceptance, right, from those people. I can say I'm Zulu, and all the Zulus, they know me and they accept me. What happens when you are ostracized? Even the church and the religion. You may say, I am Muslim and this is who I am. The Muslim can denounce you in 1 minute if you do things that don't match their whatever way of living or whatever they think defines Muslims. Now, what happens when you do that? There are so many Christians, different people from different religions have been ostracized at the point of religion, culture, or even family. So I'm trying to say, all of these things that we talked about are very non-reliable places to build our identity on, because they change and they are fueled by what people think, and they can be taken away by people again. But our identity in God remains. I am the image of God. I'll always be the image of God. Plus with that is that God acknowledges that we are, and God will always accept us. Because you know what happens with human being? Because of the ego thing, I can say, I'm so happy and I'm proud to say that James is my brother, because he's acting a certain way. The moment James starts acting in a way that do not match the ego image I have for people who I'm associated with, how they should behave, I'm going to denounce you. I'm going to say, I don't even know him. I'm going to be ashamed to call you my brother anymore. But when God comes to us, he's not coming to us from a point of insecurity. He already knows how messed up we are, morally speaking. So he comes to say, you are mine, even when he knows those. So God is not ashamed to say that you are his, that you are his image. because he's not afraid. Nobody's going to see him less because he's associating with you even when you are a sinner, you understand? But people, we are so run by insecurities. Even today, we marry people because of the things we want them to give us. So what happens in the end is, when we get to a point where those people are not providing those things for us anymore, we don't want to be with them anymore. We don't want to identify with them anymore. So you can say, I'm a married man. Oh, I'm no longer married. Now I'm single. That cannot be your identity. It's just a space you are. For a purpose, for a reason, for something you should do. So I'm trying to say, this is who you are. You are the image of God. A man created in the image of God, to be, to live, to talk, to walk, to love, to think like him. You were created as an extension of God, just like a son is to a father, a daughter is to a father, a daughter is to a mother. You understand? This is who you are. This is your identity. Everything else is just parts of you. Everything else is just dimensions of you, parts that describe either where you are, where you've been, where you are now, the situation in which you are, which may change with time.
But identity cannot change.
Identity cannot change. Even when the time comes where we have to part ways with God because we did not choose him, we will still be the image of God. Except now...
Doesn't that sound contradictory?
I have a question for you. You are a father, right? You have 2 children. One of the kids, for some reason, he decides that he wants to kill the other child. Now, if it comes to a point where you have to protect the other kid by killing the other one, because the only way you can stop it is by using lethal power. Now, when you end up, first question is, what will you do in that situation?
If I have to kill the other one to protect the other one?
Yeah.
What will I do?
Yeah. If that's the only way.
Okay, so let's do some math. Who is this child? Like, how is he? Tell me more.
The idea is they're both your children. You gave birth to both of them.
Does he have a mental issue? This one?
It's not about that. It's about the fact that, just think about the example that he has decided that he wants to kill the other one.
Logically, it makes sense to protect the other one.
Yeah, and you are using lethal power to protect the other one, and this other one will die. So my question to you, when that person dies, what will you say? Won't you say that my child died? And obviously you can explain the situation.
Yeah, my rebellious child died.
Exactly. So the rebellious images of God.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because we think that being in the image of God is an economy built on religion, but it's not. It's not built on Christianity necessarily. The Bible was not written necessarily for Christians. It was written for everyone. If you are in this world, you are confused, then read the Bible and the God says, hello, I am the creator of everything, and by the way, I also created you and you are my image. You understand? So that's the idea of saying that even when it comes to the point which will be painful, because God has to let us go, he will say, you are the image of God. That was just too rebellious.
Interesting.
And this is the nature of life that is full of paradoxes, because the idea is, even when you love people, we think in terms of either this or that, but that's not how life is all the time. I can love you and hate something that you're doing, and I can love you and not be able to be with you. I can love you and have to protect myself from you. It's not that I hate you, now I have to walk away from you. No.
Interesting. So as we get to the close of this identity portion, who am I? Any final remarks or things you want to say?
So what I want to say is, this is the harder part about this, is the fact that we need to shift our mind from the way, basically shift to looking at life from God's perspective. So a lot of people ask themselves questions that are good, but they get bad answers because they're getting them from the wrong places. So if I ask myself a question, who am I? I cannot be the one who answers that question. The one who made me qualifies to answer that question. So the idea is, I want you to take time, soak this in, and like the Bereans, ask yourself if these things are... Use the resources around you, because most of the times, even most Christians, we have received God and we say we are the children of God, but we don't actually know what that means, because we don't align with that reality, of actually being the images of God, which means to live, to act, to talk, to do like Him. Do you actually have a problem with the fact that you are in God's class? Is there any problems that you have with being the God kind? How does being a God make you feel?
Uncomfortable.
That's the idea. Being the image of God requires high level of vulnerability, and it's a paradox because you are being uplifted, but when you look within yourself, it's almost like sometimes you don't see the godness in you, and it's something that is going to inspire more humbleness in you. But most people think being God comes almost with this high level power with high pride, which God doesn't even act that way.
He doesn't have pride. That's interesting.
Yeah, so the more you see yourself as God, truly in the sense that God wants you to see it, the more humble you can be, like Jesus was.
He says, I'm lowly and meek, lowly of heart.
It's very humbling. It's very humbling. But there's a lot of pride that actually is required for you to see yourself just as a human being. Because pride and ego works in both directions. A lot of people, when they hear pride, they think of someone who's being egoistic and saying, oh, I'm powerful, I'm beautiful, I'm more handsome than you. But there's also an ego that says, who am I?
You are pride?
Yeah, so it's an inferiority complex. Most people would rather remain in a place of remaining as God's subjects because it appeals to their ego, their inferiority complex, right? And also being, and here's another part, being the subjects of God takes away a lot of responsibility from our end. Now, for this to make sense, and I think this part is important, we'll just quickly go through this part of Psalm 82. And this is where the whole idea of ye are gods comes from. Lest some people say I'm putting or miss this and taking it out of context, right? So it says, God standeth. So God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. How long will ye judge unjustly and accept the persons of the wicked? Now it says, defend the poor and the fatherless. Now, we know throughout the world, gods do not come to do justice within the world. Justice is performed or ministered by people from the time of old when you read historically. Now it says, defend the poor and the fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and the needy, deliver the poor and needy, rid them out of the hand of the wicked. Now verse 5 says, they know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness, all the foundations of the earth are out of course. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. But ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Now, the idea here is like God is talking to these people who are supposed to be gods. Now, what is the reason why we're having this conversation? They had a responsibility. Because we were created in the image of God, God does what He wants to do through us. You will never come across God walking in the street, feeding the poor, doing justice. Every time people cry to God, people elect people to do what people are asking God to do. Being gods comes with the responsibility of doing what God would do if He was on earth. Now, what would God be doing? He would be judging justly. He would be making sure that the people of the wicked do not get away with. He won't support. The Bible says, do not put yourself together, paraphrase version, do not work together with darkness, rather reprove the works of darkness. You understand? If God was here, He would be reproving the work of He would not just sit and watch while people are being oppressed and wickedness is prevailing. Defend the poor and the fatherless. When the poor and the fatherless are being oppressed at an economic level, socio-economic level, God will not just sit and watch. If He was like me sitting here today, He will not just carry on with His life. He is going to do something about it. You understand? And He says, deliver the poor and the needy. Now, the poor are captured within different spaces and different chains, and God will take responsibility of doing these things. Rid them out of the hand of the wicked. Now, this is on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, on a financial level, even on a physical level. When we talk about health, God will not watch as people are being oppressed on these levels, left, center, and He's just having a good life. The idea is being the image of God comes with the responsibility of living a godlike life, which most people don't want, most people don't like. So being the subjects of God helps us keep these low standards, which are not up there, and therefore we like being in that space where we're just the subjects of God. But now if we are in the image of God, we have to live a life like God. Then we have all these responsibilities. We have to live like God. We have to do what God would do. And that's what most of us run away from subconsciously. So here it says there's no understanding, right? Now these were people who were supposed to be gods. They were supposed to do what God would do in their generations, but they did not. And this is why God is coming now to do the judgment and asking them, why didn't you do all of these things? Now, the fact that I am the image of God comes with the responsibility of living a life like God, especially because I'm living in a God-created universe, right? So if I continue living a life anyhow, I'm going to die just as a simple man. In other words, I will have interacted with the world on a physical and solical level. I will not have interacted with the world on a spiritual level, which is where my power to be able to do that which God would do today, do it. Do you understand? So the idea is being God or being the image of God comes with a huge responsibility, and this is what we subconsciously run away from. It's better for us to accept that we will never be like God, because then we are not subject to the same standard. We're not subject to this high standard. And this is what happens with the victim mentality too, because victim mentality is when you say, I'm being oppressed and these things are happening to me, therefore it's not your job to take the responsibility to do anything about it, because it's being done to you, it's happening to you, you are not doing anything. And this is what is the biggest cause of us not embrace our God-given identity. And another thing is, we think God depends on our weakness to be God. In other words, for God to be God, we have to be almost next to nothing. And some people will even pray and say, who are we, God? We are useless. We're just like the wind. And I know there's a Bible verse that says that, but it's within context. The idea is, we think that we cannot be on the same table with God, because that's going to downgrade God. But the sole purpose for God creating us was so that we can be on the same table with Him. And again, that's within context. Like I said,
to sit in His throne.
Not necessarily. Again, like I said, like I said, with the example of a father, my father is my father, right? I will grow up to be like my father, but that doesn't mean I'll grow up to be my own father and take over everything that he has, and even take over, you understand, his territory or dominion. Everyone has a space. So my father will always remain my father. He will always be my mother's husband. You understand? I can never take that part, but I will grow up to become like him. So God did not create us so we can become our own gods, but God created us so we can become gods, and He gave us a dominion. And this is where, when He said created in the image, He gave us the things. He gave us a space to exercise this nature of godliness, to have something to dominate. Just He's the King of Kings, because we would be kings. He would be on His throne, but we also have our own individual thrones that He has given us, designated us. You understand? Like the world was given to the sons of men. We were supposed to take care of the world, and this is our responsibility. So that's why even the judgment within the world, God is not the one who's coming to do it necessarily. He does it through men. And even from the time that God created, when He created man, He ceased to create, and every creation invasion would be done only through men from that point.
So is that why, I guess this will be another conversation, is that why Jesus says all judgment has been given to me, because Jesus is considered the Son of Man?
Exactly. And obviously there's another side to things, but it only makes sense that since God handed over His authority to us, as far as dominating the earth is concerned, He can only express His will through us. And so this is the responsibility of being a God. This is the responsibility of being created in the image of God. It means that I no longer have the ability to just sit and watch while things happen. It means that I have to be concerned with what concerns God. I have to be bothered with what would bother God. Now, injustice, oppression, darkness that comes from spiritual spaces, in emotional, psychological spaces, that becomes my problem. You understand? I cannot watch things happening and say nothing. And this is where I actually come even with people who say they are Christians. They think Christianity is about creating this giant social club where people meet and they affirm an identity. We believe in Jesus Christ. Your world needs you. You are here because all problems that should be addressed to God, you are the one who should take care of them. Now, you now have the responsibility of having a consultation between you and God and saying, oh God, there's a hunger problem in the area. What do I do? There's a problem that I have to deal with. What should I do? How should I do? And this is why the Bible, it's filled with stories like that. So I'm saying that becoming or understanding that we are the image of God comes with that huge responsibility that we are God in human form. So we cannot just live a simple life anymore.
Interesting.
So the question of identity, it sounds easy, but it's actually very complex, because if you can actually get to a place where you embrace the idea of being what God wants you to be, the first reaction is you are going to be afraid, and you're going to almost realize your inadequacy from a moral point of view, which is what everyone who faced God realized that. And this is why it's very easy for people who have encounters with God to appeal to their insufficiency, because it's a huge task and it's something that requires you to continually connect with God on a spiritual level, and then you can get to actually be, live, walk, talk like God.
Interesting. Thank you everyone for watching this second episode of Identity Purpose. I hope that you guys learned a lot from our discussion and conversation. If you want to know more about Identity Purpose, you can follow all the links in the description, and also be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your other friends who are confused about who they are, right? All right, until next time, continue to embrace your true identity.
Yeah, so take time, think about it, read about it. It's going to be something that you walk into, because you've been thinking about yourself one way. You're not just gonna switch instantly, but you have to seriously sit and have a conversation with yourself.